I know that when I find myself contemplating a post-war existence, I always picture a little place far away from the cities, a dozen cats and dogs with a horse or two, maybe a place to fish, but not too strenuously, and a field in which to shoot a few birds once in a while. I think that's roughly my idea of a good life. Such was the dream that General Dwight D. Eisenhower shared with his wife Mamie in a letter from North Africa in 1943. 7 years later, the Eisenhowers bought their little place far away from the cities, a modest 189-acre farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It was a working farm, and throughout his presidential and retirement years, Eisenhower welcomed the challenge of successfully managing its operation. The focus of the farm was Eisenhower's prize-winning show herd of Black Angus cattle. While president, Ike delighted in providing his guests with a grand tour of the newly built show barn where his herdsmen prepared the cattle for competition. Though cattle grazed in the pastures, Eisenhower stabled horses and ponies for the grandchildren in the 19th century bank barn. On the adjacent lawns and grounds, the general pursued his outdoor interests. He enjoyed trying to outshoot his friends and Secret Service agents at the skeet range. He deftly grilled steaks for his guests at the backyard barbecue, and he honed his golf game on the nearby putting green. His golf cart was parked in the garage along with the Crosley runabout he used to survey the farm. While Ike's attention centered on his land, Mamie concentrated on the farmhouse, which was renovated step by step according to her ideas. The house served as not only the quiet, comfortable home they'd always longed for, but as an elegant showplace as well. The living room showcased the gifts the Eisenhowers received over the years from heads of state as well as friends, including the pearl-inlaid black lacquer coffee table from the Republic of Korea, a silk Tabriz rug from the Shah of Iran, and a painting of Prague, Czechoslovakia, presented to General Eisenhower by its citizens at the end of World War II. The marble fireplace removed from the White House in 1873 by President Grant was an anniversary gift from the Eisenhower White House staff. The room was seldom used by the Eisenhowers, though, as Ike always considered it too formal and stuffy. More to their liking was the modest, comfortable sun porch, their favorite room in the house. Here, Ike and Mamie watched TV, dined from tray tables, played cards with friends, and entertained distinguished guests. The general pursued his hobby of oil painting here as well. Eisenhower shrewdly used the porch for diplomacy, relying on its relaxed setting to encourage intimate conversations with visiting world leaders, among them Nikita Khrushchev of the Soviet Union, Charles de Gaulle of France, and Konrad Adenauer of West Germany. In the entrance hall, a guest register provided a record of all visitors to the farm. Nearby, a curio cabinet contained Mamie's knickknacks ranging from gold goblets to plastic figurines of the presidents and first ladies. When family and friends visited, the Eisenhowers served dinner in the formal dining room amid lively conversation, led in turn by the General and Mrs. Eisenhower. This room, too, was highlighted by gifts, including Mamie's tea service that Ike bought piece by piece when he was a young officer. The kitchen and adjoining butler's pantry with the green linoleum floor and counters and the Crosley refrigerator typified the 1950s. The cook usually prepared the meals, but the general enjoyed concocting some of his own culinary specialties, soups, stews, and Pennsylvania Dutch-style breakfasts. Upstairs, no room better reflected the personality of Mamie Eisenhower than the master bedroom. Her devotion to family and friends was evident from the many photos displayed throughout the room. In her adjoining dressing room, pearls and perfumes covered the dressing table. Brightly colored outfits packed the closet, and assorted hats lined the shelves. The general's small and sparsely decorated dressing room contrasted sharply with the master bedroom. Following his heart attack in 1955, Eisenhower used this room for afternoon naps. The general placed his portrait of his oldest grandchildren, David and Anne, above the bed. In the sitting room, Mamie displayed her favorites of the general's many paintings, the Mexican and Winter, St. Louis Creek. 4 other paintings hung in the hall to the guest rooms. Family and friends used these rooms when visiting the farm. The most well-known guest to spend a weekend here was Prime Minister Nehru of India. To accommodate their many guests and run the household, the Eisenhowers employed a maid, cook, and valet. The maid's room down the hall was decorated with furniture purchased by the Eisenhowers when they were first married. Back on the ground floor, the 2 rooms in the Fieldstone portion of the house were exclusively devoted to Ike's pursuits. Here in the den, the general liked to read and play cards with friends. He lined the shelves along one wall with hundreds of books in his personal library. Histories, biographies, and westerns were his favorites. A Civil War musket and a Georgia pike were mounted above the fireplace. Eisenhower used the den and the adjacent office as the temporary White House while recuperating from his 1955 heart attack. The desk, a reproduction of one used by George Washington, was made from floorboards removed from the White House when it was renovated during the Truman administration. While at his desk, Eisenhower conducted presidential business as well as pored over his cattle records and farm accounts. The farmhouse, the old bank barn, the croplands and pasture. This was Ike's wartime dream fulfilled, the first and only home he and Mamie ever owned. Administered by the National Park Service as Eisenhower National Historic Site, the farm offers an intimate glimpse into the life and times of the Eisenhowers. Dwight Eisenhower once said, "I come from the very heart of America." He was born in Denison, Texas on October 14, 1890. As one of 6 sons growing up in Abilene, Kansas, young Ike learned from his parents, David and Ida, the virtues of honesty, ambition, and hard work. Eisenhower discovered that a free education awaited any young man appointed to the United States Military Academy. And though he did not stand out academically at West Point, a report on his progress said he was born to command. During Ike's assignment at Fort Sam Houston in 1916, he met and married Mamie Geneva Dowd. The couple had 2 children, Dowd Dwight, who died at the age of 3 of scarlet fever, and John Sheldon Dowd. When the United States entered World War I, Eisenhower received his first independent command at Camp Colt here in Gettysburg. This Army Tank Training Center was located on the fields of Pickett's Charge. During the 1920s and 30s, Eisenhower held a series of staff assignments in Panama, Europe, and the Philippines. He was known as a man who could get the job done well and on time. Eisenhower began World War II on the staff of Army Chief of Staff George Marshall, who appointed him commander of the European Theater of Operations in 1942. In 1943, he was named Supreme Allied Commander for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Europe. His orders were simple. You will land in Europe, and proceeding to Germany will destroy Hitler and all his forces. On June 6, 1944, in what has been called the greatest amphibious assault ever attempted, thousands of Allied troops stormed ashore on the beaches of Normandy, France. Eisenhower directed the overall movements of the armies and skillfully maintained harmony among the Allied forces. When Germany surrendered, Eisenhower, never a man to glorify his achievements, issued a victory message that was short and to the point. The mission of this Allied force was fulfilled at 0241 local time, May 7, 1945. After the war, Eisenhower served as Army Chief of Staff. Retiring from the Army, Eisenhower wrote Crusade in Europe and became president of Columbia University. It was during this time that Ike and Mamie purchased their Gettysburg farm as a retirement home. Eisenhower's retirement was delayed when President Truman appointed him the first Supreme Commander of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In 1952, Eisenhower was persuaded to run for the Republican presidential nomination. During his 2 terms as the 34th President of the United States, Eisenhower balanced the federal budget. He ended the war in Korea, created the interstate highway system, and sent federal troops into Little Rock, Arkansas to enforce the Supreme Court ruling on desegregation. Eisenhower launched the United States into the space age with the creation of NASA. He faced troubles with China, the Suez Canal, and Central America, and strove for peace with the Soviet Union. On January 20th, 1961, Eisenhower retired to his Gettysburg farm. Here, Ike enjoyed raising black Angus cattle, playing golf, painting, and showing guests around the farm. He served as elder statesman and wrote 3 books at his office at Gettysburg College. When he died on March 28, 1969, one who served under him wrote a fitting epitaph. I shall remember him not just as a figure who wielded tremendous power and helped shape events of our time, but as a man of goodwill who, despite his high position, his great personal popularity and international celebrity, never forgot his essential humanity and that of the people with whom he lived and worked. Welcome to Gettysburg National Military Park, site of one of the most famous battles in American history. In the first 3 days of July 1863, approximately 165,000 Union and Confederate soldiers struggled over this land. When it was over, nearly 51,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing. 4 months later, President Abraham Lincoln delivered his Gettysburg Address at the dedication of the National Cemetery for the Union Dead. Almost a century later, President Dwight D. Eisenhower added another layer to Gettysburg's history when his Gettysburg Farm became a presidential retreat and temporary White House. Today, the battlefield and Eisenhower Farm are administered by the National Park Service. The Park's Visitor Center features the Electric Map Orientation Program and the Gettysburg Museum of the Civil War, one of the largest collections of artifacts from the battle and the Civil War. The map program is located at the rear of the museum. This 30-minute program uses a large relief map and lights to explain the movements of the 2 armies during the battle. Once you are oriented, you should tour the battlefield. The Park Service offers 2 methods. One is to tour on your own using the map available at the information desk. Follow the auto tour symbols, which provide direction and mark stops at all of the major points of interest. The folder, wayside exhibits, taped messages, and a vast number of markers and monuments explain the action along the way. The second method is to tour with a guide licensed by the National Park Service. These individuals conduct a 2-hour personal tour of the battlefield in your vehicle for a fee. Ask at the information desk to schedule a guide. Whether you tour the battlefield on your own or with a guide, we encourage you to explore this historic place. Gettysburg has one of the largest outdoor collections of bronze and granite sculptures in this country. Over 1,000 memorials, markers, and monuments on the field describe the fighting and pay tribute to the Americans who fought here. The landscape remains much as it was in 1863, including many historic homes and farms around which the battle was fought. During any season, the park offers a scenic setting to reflect on the courage, tragedy, and significance of Gettysburg. During the summer, late spring, and early fall, National Park Rangers conduct free programs highlighting the battle and the National Cemetery. Inquire at the information desk for program schedules. 200 yards south of the Visitor Center is the Cyclorama Center, where the panoramic painting of Pickett's Charge is exhibited. This cyclorama, 356 feet in circumference and 26 feet in height, was completed in 1884. It is one of only 4 such paintings in North America. The Cyclorama Center also features additional Civil War exhibits and a short film. In 1951, Dwight David Eisenhower purchased a farm adjoining Gettysburg National Military Park. He planned to use it as a retirement home, but his election as president postponed these plans. The farm served as a retreat from Washington during his presidential years and as a retirement home at the conclusion of his second term in the White House in 1961. The home and farm of our 34th president is now preserved by the National Park Service as the Eisenhower National Historic Site. Tickets are available at the National Park Service Visitor Center, where a shuttle bus transports visitors to the site on a regular schedule. Your visit includes tours of the house and grounds, and you may spend as much time at the site as you wish during the hours of operation. Rangers conduct programs in season and are always available to answer questions. Gettysburg is part of our nation's heritage. From the site of one of history's epic struggles to the home of one of our great military leaders and presidents, there is something for everyone. The National Park Service welcomes you and hopes you enjoy your visit.
Well, I see we're trying a new experiment this morning. I hope it doesn't prove to be a disturbing influence. I have no announcements. We'll go directly to questions.
President Clark of INS, could you discuss the seriousness of the latest communist attacks on nationalist islands in the China Sea in the light of our commitments to defend Formosa?
No military authority that I know of has tried to rate these small islands that are now under attack, or indeed the Tashens themselves, as an essential part of the defenses of Formosa and of the Pescadores, to the defense of which we are committed by the treaty that is now before the Senate for approval. The two islands, I believe, that have been under attack are not occupied by Chinese national regulars. They've been occupied by irregulars or guerrillas. Now, the Tashens themselves are a different proposition. They are occupied by a division of troops. They are of value. There is no denying that. They are of value as an outpost, an additional point for observation. They are not a vital element, as we see it, in the defense of the islands. Now, exactly what is going to be the development there, I cannot foresee, so I won't try to speculate on to exactly what we should do in that area. We don't even know, I think at this moment, at least I wasn't informed this morning, of what the Generalissimo's personal intentions are with respect to that particular region.
Mr. President,
This gentleman here.
Robert from Washington Post. In the light of this latest fighting, would you consider that it would be useful to have a ceasefire between Communist China and nationalist China, if that could be arranged through the UN or by some other means?
Well, I should like to see the UN attempt to exercise good offices, I believe, because wherever there is any kind of fighting and open violence in the world, there's always it's always sort of a powder keg. Whether the United Nations could do anything in this particular place, I don't know, because probably each side would insist it was an internal affair. Although from our viewpoint, that it might be a good thing to have them take a look at the problem.
Mr. President Smith of the United Press, would it be possible for you, sir, to define or give us your impressions of Secretary Dulles' use of the word forever yesterday when he said that we would not wait forever for the release of our airmen by the Chinese Communists?
Well, now, Mr. Smith, I didn't read the exact terms of his statement. I did not, and therefore I don't know the context in which he was speaking. I do know this. Mr. Dulles and I meet together more often, I think, than any other two individuals of this government, at least in the cabinet level. And we are in perfect accord as to our solution to these problems as they arise. So whatever he said, I'm sure it was in keeping with the general policies and convictions he and I hold about this problem.
Buffalo News, in your State of the Union message, I believe you used the phrase, never to be forgotten man. So I wonder if you could give us a little better, more complete insight into what you had in mind in using that phrase.
Well, as long as there is an American unjustly imprisoned, I am going to continue to do my best to exert the influence that I think is available to us to secure his release and to see he gets justice. Now, let us never forget, ladies and gentlemen, that the lives of these individuals are at stake, as well as some academic concept of the exact right in this thing. And let us not forget this either. Our own knowledge of our purity of motive in the world is not always shared, sometimes even by those we know to be our friends. And it is idle to say there cannot be misunderstandings on the other part, on the other side, as to our motives and intentions and ideas. You will recall there were 25,000 prisoners escaped that were of North Koreans, and they escaped into South Korea. And this created a very great difficulty at the time of the armistice negotiations. Now, we thought we were right, but what did the other side think? So you have these problems where we are certain that justice, decency, and right is on our side, but we also have the problem of convincing others that we are right and just and decent. And sometimes these things can create a lot of misapprehension and misunderstanding.
Bert, can you give us any idea of what you would consider a reasonable time for the UN to negotiate this for the return of these prisoners?
No, I don't think I could guess. I think that the time factor would always have to be related to any progress that you could see or feel or believe in. So as long as a man of the character and standing of Hammarskjöld believes that he is making progress, I think that that you would have to wait. Because I repeat, there is here involved the question of lives of people, as well as our rights, the understandings, the common understanding of the facts in the case. There's numerous things that are involved, and I think he ought to have a full chance to do what he can.
Mr. President.
I think, Ms. Craig.
Mr. President, May Craig is the main papers. In view of the communist violation of the Korean truce, what compliance could we expect from the UN truce in the Formosa Straits?
Well, maybe the best answer to that by saying that's a good question. But I think that is a problem forever in dealing with someone who shows a proclivity for acting like solemn agreements for scraps of paper. And it is what I think that we, Mr. Dulles and I, always mean when we say we want some confirmation in deeds, not just words. And you will recall that in dealing with these questions in the past, when we've talked about the deeds that were necessary in the Far East, we've talked about withdrawal of troops in Korea that would remove the stigma placed upon Communist China by the United Nations in calling them an aggressor nation, in returning our prisoners, in abstaining from aggressive acts in Southeast Asia, in conducting itself as a civilized nation in the councils of the world. Now you begin to understand what we mean by deeds that give some belief that we may have confidence in the agreements we draw up with them. This is a very, what you are doing is voicing a doubt, and I must say that I think all of us share it.
Mr. President.
Well,
Sarah McClendon of the El Paso Times. Sir, the congressmen on Capitol Hill say that if they can find a copy of the budget to read, that they can't understand it. Particularly, they say the military budget is couched in such general terms that they can't find where the money is to be spent. Now, the justification for these individual projects will go to two committees, appropriations committees, and not to the members of Congress in general. Is there anything you can do to tell these people who have to vote on this where the money is to be spent?
It's my understanding that's what the committees of Congress are for, and that is what the people that appear before those committees are for. The national defense officials from the secretary on down to any level that the military committees and the Appropriations Committee want to call will appear before them, and they will explain every single item in it. And I can't be expected to take the details of a volume like that, which I forget the number of pages, and explain that in detail to individuals anyway.
President?
I think the gentleman just behind you.
O'Brien of the Philadelphia...
No, just behind you, I think. Sorry.
Joel Office of the New York Times. Mr. President, would you comment on the proposal that Formosa and Red China be considered separate, independent nations, and that there be an exchange of mutual security and settle the problem that way?
No, I don't think I'll comment on it for the simple reason that commenting would make it appear that my convictions were finally formed in this area. It is, of course, one of the possibilities that's constantly studied, but you can see that both sides to it might be very reluctant to have that proposal seriously considered.
Mr. President?
This gentleman.
Philadelphia Inquirer. In your budget message, you said you would not recommend an appropriation for the dredging of the upper channel of the Delaware River unless the cost-sharing plan was worked out. Some of the congressmen from that area are pointing out that private industry has never before been assessed for a navigation project. Now, my question is this a new government policy, or are there special reasons for cost-sharing in the Delaware River project?
Well, there are two things, I think. One is that I do believe that when the federal government spends money that is mainly to the interests of a locality, we should find some way to make that locality participate. I did not, by any manner of means, specify the method by which this partnership could be worked out. And I suppose that the range of things that could be studied would be all the way from tolls, that is, from the vessels actually using such a channel, to some direct participation in the original case. But I do believe that we should, in these great projects, try to find a way that you get the local concern for economy or local benefits reflected in the appropriations the federal government makes. Admittedly, let us say, this is to the general welfare of the whole nation. And if it's a new policy, I think it should have been considered long ago. So,
President?
President Marvin Aerosmith of the AP. With tomorrow the second anniversary of your inauguration, I wonder if you'd care to give us an appraisal of your first 2 years and tell us something of your hopes for the next 2 or maybe even the next 6?
Looks like a loaded question. Well, of course, I know of no way of evaluating 2 years as this except to remind ourselves of certain things that have happened. And I think I can say this without attempting to take either too much partisan credit or personal credit, because all of us realize that if these things have gone on, some of them have been participated in almost unanimously by both parties. But let us, without any further explanation, just take a look. We were then fighting in Korea, and that war has been ended. Iran was in such a situation that we weakly thought we had possibly lost it, or we would see it going under communist influence unreservedly. And finally, there was a struggle going on between two of our friends, Britain and Egypt. The Trieste situation was upsetting all our relations in the Mediterranean, and bade fair to create really serious trouble in those countries, particularly in Italy. There was a growing difficulty in Central America, which finally flared up into the Guatemalan incident. And at that moment, it looked like we were probably approaching close to defeat in our efforts to get any kind of agreement in Western Europe. Now, those things have been largely eliminated. In addition, I believe that we have been successful in convincing all of the countries of the Mideast that we are desperately trying to be friends with everybody, trying to make friends between ourselves and each of the nations concerned. So I think that on the whole, in spite of a weakening or a weakened situation in Indonesia and of the partial loss of Vietnam, that the foreign situation is more stable, generally speaking, looks better. And that is not by any means to say that it looks rosy. At home, we started out, you will recall, with a definite economic program. I'm going to read one thing. Someone called my attention this morning because they said I'd been here 2 years. They pointed out that I said I was going to balance the budget quickly. And I want to read from the speech I made in Peoria, Illinois, October 2nd, 1952. A first and vital step is to eliminate the deficit from our national budget. Second, restore the incentive to expand production. A major step toward this end is to reduce government spending and thereby permit lower taxation. Federal spending can be cut from the present rate of $81 billion a year. My goal, assuming that the Cold War gets no worse, is to cut federal spending to something like $60 billion within 4 years. Such a cut would eliminate the deficit in the budget. Now, of course, you have seen the recent budget and its estimate that there will still be a $2.4 billion deficit. But the budget itself, by coincidence, is $62.4 billion. So I almost can claim credit for being a prophet if I could have found some way of eliminating that $2.4 billion where it looked like being balanced. Now, in addition to that, controls have been removed from our economy. There has been a new farm program set up that we have every reason to believe will bring about a better balance between production and markets. We have brought about the transition from a war economy to a peace economy with, I think, almost a unprecedented easing of the situation and its impact upon our people in their several occupations and businesses. There has been a reduction in taxes that is unprecedented for any single year in our history. Now, along with that, we come to the moment and we look ahead. We have an expanding economy. We have an economy and an industry, financial situation that reflects the confidence and hope of our people, the belief of our people. Now, I'm not saying that the stock market itself, its rises and falls, is necessarily an index of what are going to happen in this country, but it does reflect that kind of confidence that we have tried in the past so hard to instill. There is a greater production of houses in our country today than ever before in our history. We are even higher than we were today in 1953. All the way along, consumer spending is going up, consumer savings are going up. There is, of course, not a wholly satisfactory picture. There are areas, and in particular industries, in particular areas, where there's still difficulty. We're working on them. But the outlook, certainly from the standpoint of our internal economy, is good. And I know of no better measure, if I may conclude here, Mr. Harris Smith, than to say, how do people feel today is the way they felt then.
While you're at Washington Post, Times Herald. Mr. President, to go back to the fighting in the Far East for a moment. The dispatches from Formosa say that the Chinese Reds may now storm the other islands off the coast, including the Tashan. Your peace story from Formosa says there's an American detachment on one of the Tashan Islands. If we may assume that that story is correct, would we leave that American detachment
on any of those islands in view of the fact that they may be attacked by the Chinese Reds?
Well, I would have to ask the commander on the spot what orders these individuals are under. Whether they're still there or not, I don't know. Most of these units, well, I think that's a technicality. The fact is that I assume the commander has given his instructions under different circumstances to what will occur. And it hasn't been brought to my attention. But Mr. Haggerty does say there are 4 or 5 men on one of the islands, I think.
Yesterday, Secretary Wilson said that he would favor non-strategic trade with the communist bloc countries. Does that bear your considered approval, or can you comment further on it, sir?
Well, it certainly couldn't be said to carry my considered approval, although this subject, of course, has been discussed in this government, in Congress, since for 2 years. There are 2 points, I think, as well to remember about trade. One, trade is a process that takes place between 2 nations or 2 groups, and presumably for the economic benefit of both. If you trade something to me, you think that you're getting a benefit of the trade, then I think I'm getting it. But there's also this. Trade is one of the greatest influences in the hands of the diplomat, and how he uses it, negatively or positively, or in roundabout methods even. It is an influence to bring about and carry out the policies under which that country is operating. Now, our policy is simple: to promote peaceful relationships in the world. And I would say we would never, with anyone, carry on trade unless we thought that that cause were gaining. And certainly under present conditions, we do have complete embargoes with respect to certain countries. And so just some casual statement of that kind would not would not change that policy.
Smith of the UP, when you said arrangements have been made that when 2 departments reach different conclusions on security cases, that there will be coordination. Could you tell us who does the coordinating? You're referring to the unit in the Justice Department?
That's correct. I've asked him in each case that before that case would have to be referred to me, that they first meet with this individual and try to accomplish that coordination. Of course, if I think a similar case, the one to which you refer, occurred in the future, and it couldn't be settled, well, they'd bring it to me, but then there would be a complete report of investigation on both sides.
Mr. President, in your State of the Union message, you promised or indicated there would be a positive federal program to aid the construction of schools. But in the budget message, we couldn't find any money for it. Will there be some actual expenditure?
But there has to be, remember this, there has to be a new authorization in that regard. Now, there is a plan from Mrs. Hobby's office going to the Congress on 15th February. And it is something, remember this, there is a White House conference called for November. It's a very broad educational conference, and nobody in this administration is going to get in the way of the findings of that to the extent of, let's say, vitiating their recommendations or trying to anticipate them. But what we are trying to do now is, recognizing the acute shortage of schoolrooms, is to find a method of helping and assisting states and localities and districts to get this thing on the rails, knowing that we can't possibly in this way hurt anything that'll be done or damage anything that'll be done by this conference.
Mr. President, a moment ago you read from a speech in which you outlined a 4-year program for balancing a budget. Well, I believe about 3 of those are up now. Could you say that that's a promise to balance it next year?
I said, I thought someone reminded me I'd been there 2 years.
Well, it's the 3rd budget, I believe, sir.
Oh, no, the first budget we have been prepared. We've been here 2 years. Now, let's don't try to push me too hard.